This is Platform Diaries with Shane Williams, who chews the fat with entrepreneurs, startup founders and thought leaders on what it takes to traverse the wall between startup and scale up.
As a startup founder or CEO, investor reporting can be a downright burden. Some founders even describe it as a necessary evil. But what if we could turn that burden into opportunity and use it to raise money rather than just reporting? You're listening to Platform Diaries and I'm your host, Shane Williams. My guest today is Nathan Beckord. Based in San Francisco, Nathan's described by his clients as a wingman to startup CEOs or the biz dev CFO to go to. Nathan has been helping startups to raise capital for over 20 years. And he joins us in today's episode to discuss how to use your investor updates to market rather than report, and his tips for creating a killer investor update. I trust you'll enjoy the interview. So Nathan, thank you for joining me on Platform Diaries.
Thanks for having me. Really appreciate it.
Mate, I think the reason I reached out to you to be a guest on the show is because I know that, as I mentioned in the intro, you've been in this industry for a long time. And one of the things that really strikes me when I'm talking to founders more recently is I'm going to describe it as the way some of them describe it as kind of a burden, this idea that now that people are giving me money, I'm no longer bootstrapping this thing myself. I'm required to do some level of reporting. And then as the business matures more, we get more investors, VCs, whatever, and there's this requirement to do more, which in some respects, I think people see it as, look, it's just this thing that I have to do, but it's probably on my least loved items on the list. And I think maybe there's a misnomer that this is just a thing we have to do versus something that, we could leverage better. And so thank you for joining me. I guess where I want to go with this first question is, do you think there's a misconception around the value that investor reporting provides and could it be better leveraged?
Yeah, I do. I love this topic. I love this question. I think like you just mentioned and alluded to, many founders feel it as an obligation or duty. You just raise money. People gave you money. They expect to be able to follow along with your company's journey. They expect you to report to them how the business is doing, right? That's natural. If you were an investor, you'd want to understand that as well. And of course, if you're investing in public companies, they have an obligation to file annual reports, quarterly reports, all that stuff, right? There's an information flow that, is just a good fiduciary duty, right? But it doesn't have to be a duty and obligation. And I actually like to flip the investor reporting a little bit in two ways. One is actually thinking of it as, marketing. You are marketing your business both to your current investors and we can go off on a whole tangent about this, but you can use investor updates and investor reporting to market your business to future investors. So that's one thing, and we can go into a lot more detail on that. But the other avenue, instead of just viewing it as, I've got to report my data about my business, really using the investor updates and reporting to engage and activate the people who just wrote you a check, right? Investors are connected. They're intelligent. It's hard to meet a dumb investor. I mean, they're out there, but, by and large, investors are pretty savvy, smart people. They've been successful in their own businesses or they've made their money some way, right? And so really using the investor updates to engage those people and put them to work for your business is another huge value of it. And then I guess the last thing I'll mention on that is it doesn't have to be this painful, onerous process. You can actually get into a rhythm on investor updates and do these things in a regular way pretty easily and efficiently.
What occurs to me is the way you kind of described it is there's either this onerous obligation or there's this opportunity for marketing. So I guess maybe you could just elaborate a bit more on what does good look like. It's pretty cliche, but like when it's done well, how's it done and what's kind of the benefit?
So, okay, let me pick up on that and actually talk about it as a marketing, kind of flipping the script here of using investor updates and reporting as a marketing tool. One of the most amazing funding hacks, if you're a startup and you plan to raise capital sometime in the next 2 years, we'll say, one of the very best things you can do, and I love this tactic, is first build a list of target investors, prospects, investors that invest in your industry, your type of deal, and then actually reach out to them, Cold email is even okay in this scenario. And you're basically asking them, hey, I run a startup. My startup's called Founder Suite. I've been following you on Twitter, or, I've identified you as someone I'd like to form a relationship with. We send out a one-page company update once a month, very short, very succinct, and it just kind of talks about our business. May I have your permission to add you to our distribution list so you can kind of get to know what we're working on, and you can get a sneak peek or early access to our deal. I'm not raising money right now. I'm not hitting you up for money. I'm not even asking you for a pitch meeting or a call, simply asking for permission to add you to our company, our investor update distribution list. And, a lot of investors will give you permission because it's their job to kind of be early into deal flow. That's what investors do. And so you start sending out an update, and it can be really, really short. And it can be like company overview, key wins or recent progress, maybe some metrics, an image of your product, an image of your team, or a little summary of your team, and maybe a little thing about what's coming up next. And that's all it has to be. You can crank that out very quickly. And you send that out, once a month, like clockwork, religiously. And you start to build these relationships with investors many months in advance of actually asking them to invest in you. And I've seen this technique done by startups over and over again. And I've seen deals happen like even before the founder goes out to raise money, because investors love that pattern of, here's a company, they're making progress, they're reporting on that progress every month, like clockwork. I want to put some money into them. And I've seen deals kind of get swooped up before the founder even goes out to raise capital. So picture yourself as a founder who doesn't actually have to go raise capital because they've nurtured these relationships with investors, for 6 months. Beautiful. It's an amazing thing. Of course, it doesn't always happen like that, but that pattern is a really healthy one. And then once you raise money, that update expands a little bit in terms of what should be included in it. Now you've got trust with these investors. They've written you a check. You've got a term sheet and all the good stuff in place. Now you add a few other sections to that update, things like challenges, problems, kind of the difficult things you're facing, and also maybe a section on how you can help as the investor, and maybe a section thanking investors for helping out on certain things. And you start to send that update to those investors who have written your check. And again, that cycle of telling them what you need help with and then thanking them for their help puts them to work and helping grow your business. So, that's, I guess, in a nutshell, pretty high level, how to do it really well is start to do it many months before you want to raise money, and then actually, kind of engage with investors after raising money. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think if we were to distill that down, it's just good business practice to do this fiduciary reporting anyway, but why not use some of those metrics for marketing with the payback of it's going to make your life in attracting investors easier if they've kind of already got a relationship. They know that, I'm guessing, I've already, even if it's subconsciously, identified that you're the sort of founder that I feel comfortable with because I know you're going to keep me in the loop and I'm going to see the numbers more often.
That's absolutely right. Put yourself in the shoes of an investor. You've got a certain amount of money to invest in startups, right? And if you have two identical startups, but one of those founders is really proactive in like engaging with you, reporting to you, involving you in their growth and their story, who do you want to invest in? Is that one that's really that proactive go-getter, right? You're kind of signaling, it's a signaling effect there. Yeah.
So we've kind of talked about why you should do it, and then, what does good look like and some of the benefits. What about, do you see, I'm guessing in the industry you've been in for a long time, I guess you see people who don't do such a great job. Like, what are some of the common mistakes or things that you see that founders do that maybe, that's not going to help, or I wouldn't have done that?
Yeah. I mean, the first one, the most common is pretty easy and obvious. It's founders don't do it. It's hard, right? And I get this. I've been late in my updates. We have investors here at Founder Suite, and I tend to write them a little bit more on a quarterly basis because our news cycle's not, super rapid. So mistake number one is founders don't do it, or they don't get into a regular habit of doing it, right? They might send an update and then 4 months, 6 months go by and they'll remember to do another one, but there's no pattern, there's no regularity to it, there's no rhythm to it. There's a very kind of famous angel investor here in the Bay Area called Jason Calacanis, and he put out a quote, maybe it was a tweet. It's like, if my startups are not sending me a regular update, I assume they're going out of business, right? And so not doing it is kind of a negative signal that, your startup's really struggling and has problems. So that's one thing. I mean, other mistakes I've seen folks make are pretty basic stuff, like they didn't spend a few minutes to just edit it and polish it, where it's kind of hard to read and messy, right? I mean, just sort of basic things like it's kind of janky. Or occasionally I've seen updates that are like way too long. You almost want to like take the scenario of like, assume the investor's reading this on their iPhone, can they kind of skim it on their ferry ride home or whatever, right? So not too long. Don't go in like to all the weeds. What other things? I mean, I guess sometimes I've seen folks make too much, like too deep in the weeds where they're talking about like real granular issues about code or, stuff that like maybe investors can't really help out with. That's more of a internal operation thing. I guess the converse of that is I would keep it fairly high level so investors can kind of be thinking strategically about stuff, not like in the deep weeds of your business. Those are probably a couple good starter points.
You're right. I think you started to bleed into where I was going to head next, was we've talked about how you could repurpose this stuff and use it for marketing and be proactive. We've talked about that point just there. But is there any other tips from your years of experience that you think founders should be considering?
Yeah, I mean, I think, well, in particular around the investor updates thing, one of the great little tactics to do is, I guess, a couple things. One is actually block it off. One of the things I'm always telling our customers to do, block it off on your calendar. Maybe it's the third Friday of every month, and you create a calendar, put in an hour or two on your calendar and make it a repeating calendar event with an alert. So it's not only blocked off so you're not getting meetings, but it's actually reminding you to do your update, right? And that helps you get into that healthy habit. It's kind of like going to the fitness club or the gym. Once you do it a few times, you kind of make it a pattern or a habit, right? I would say also create a template, right? Like the first, and we have this a little bit in our product Founder Suite, but like create a template with the sections you want. And then that will make it a lot easier when you do number 2, number 3, number 4, if you're really just kind of reusing the same template and of course changing and updating, the metrics and the progress points and stuff like that. That makes it really easy. And also, I guess, third point maybe is just don't overstress it. I know founders sometimes get nervous because this is going out to their investors. And so they maybe overthink it. Like, investors would rather have something than nothing, right? Something that's not perfect than nothing, if that makes sense. So this doesn't have to be a Pulitzer Prize winning masterpiece. You just have to get it done and communicate.
I think the one you talked about earlier too, making it easier to read. I mean, do you feel like, or do you sort of get feedback that sometimes these things are too detailed? I just need something I can read in 5 minutes. Is there a common, maybe it's very different for different types of investors, but is there a common, this is where you're aiming in terms of readability?
I know it is kind of a delicate balance, right? You don't want to be so high level that there's no meat to it, but you also don't want to be so deep in the weeds that investors are going to be like, this is too granular for me. I can't help you with this really micro issues. It should be fairly high level, pretty much strategy of the business. Like when I think about our most recent update I sent out, I talked about some of the big wins we've had, like big things that are easy to understand, some new deals, new product releases coming out. On the challenges side, I'm talking about things like, we're dealing with our engineering team, which is mostly Ukrainians, and struggles that we're having there. I'm asking them for help, with thinking through business model stuff. Pretty high level though, right? And so I guess that's that fairly strategic, but enough tactical stuff where they can actually help out. Be specific about what you want help with, whether it's recruiting a VP of sales or, helping you think on your business model or intros to more investors, right? Being very specific about that. I guess that was another mistake sometimes I see founders make is they're trying to engage and get their investors to be helping, but they're not specific enough in what they need help with. So definitely get right down to it.
And then the level of detail, I can imagine that would be difficult, right? I mean, you've come up with this idea that's going to change the world. It's your baby. You're building this business. You're in the weeds day to day, and you're living this thing. I can imagine that'd be really difficult to then try and abstract yourself to enough level of detail that you can, particularly, I mean, if you're a really highly technical founder, it's probably highly likely that you are in the weeds of the code and trying to unplug this stuff. And maybe if people are giving you money, have no ability to help you with that, or maybe they do. But I can imagine that would be terribly difficult. So I think that's really sage advice. Thanks. So I suppose it would be remiss of me not to ask, what is next for FounderSuite?
Yeah, I'm pretty excited about FounderSuite. We've been around like 6 years, so we're not a brand new startup. And during that 6 years, we've been launching 1 or 2 new products every year, all focused around the funding stack, as we call it. We started with an investor CRM. We added an investor database. We're up to about 200,000 investors in our database, including many good Aussie and Kiwi investors. And we've just been adding since then. We added a data room, pitch deck hosting, all this good stuff. And right now we are going through 2 big things, big projects. One is we are updating our database like in a massive way. We're adding about 50,000 more investors and enriching the data. So really, making it really competitive with like investor databases that cost 20 times what we do. So I'm excited about that. And then we're also completely reskinning and rebuilding the platform with a fresh, modern look that I'm super excited about. So it's a couple months away, but it's looking beautiful. Right after my call with you, I'm going into our designs and improving. I'm going pixel by pixel and approving or rejecting like designs, and it's really beautiful. It's very fresh, modern. So that's kind of fun.
That sounds exciting, mate. Thanks for your time. I will make sure that there's a link to your LinkedIn bio and the FounderSuite website in the show notes. Appreciate you spending time with us, and we'll chat again soon.
Thank you, Shane. Appreciate it.
You've been listening to Platform Diaries with Shane Williams. To find out about how Shane enables digital businesses to scale, please visit shanewilliams.com.au. Thank you for listening.